Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. My name is Erika, and today I'm speaking to my dear friend from Survivor 41, Dr. Evvie Jagoda, and we are talking all things that come with the coming out journey. But first, I love to start the episode by talking about something that I was happy to see this week, and this is the thing. I record these episodes in advance, so what I'm happy to see is probably going to be weeks behind me by the time you hear it, but just suspend your disbelief and stay with me. I'm so excited that I have an upcoming trip to Florida. So right now, as I'm recording this, I'm a few days out from traveling to Florida for the Hearts of Reality premiere party for Survivor 45. Now, I committed to going to this party months ago. It was back at the beginning of the summer. And Heather and I were always saying, let's make a trip out of it. The two of us are going to be in Florida, so let's think of something fun to do. And it's become even more important to me to be able to plan some fun days with her because I was actually supposed to travel with Heather over the summer, but unfortunately I needed to cancel because I was filming The Traitors Canada. So it's been almost a year since I have last seen Heather in person. So as of today, we've been able to plan out our itinerary. We've planned out trips to Disney World and Universal. And I am so excited for the next few days. Yes, by the time you hear this, the trip will be over, but I really want to take this moment to commemorate that excitement you feel right before a trip. And again, knock on wood, fingers crossed that nothing crazy happens. And by the time you see this, the trip will have been amazing and a ton of fun. And I actually do want to get Heather back on the podcast to record a happy hour episode, my first ever happy hour episode, where we talk more about our friendship and we can tell you a bit more about this trip. And going on a trip like this is so important to me because some of the friendships you develop on Survivor run so deep. Heather is such a cherished friend to me, and it means a lot that even though it's been a few years since we filmed the show, we can still be excited about having these new experiences and be excited about spending time together. And speaking of friendships from Survivor, I am so happy that today I'm speaking to Dr. Evvie Jagoda, who is one of my loved friends from my time on that show. Today, we are talking about coming out. So Evvie was so generous to talk about this ongoing journey that they're having with coming out in terms of their sexuality and their gender identity and how there are so many words that somebody can use to identify themselves. And it's okay if you're constantly changing and you're constantly questioning things because that's part of life. Everything is, as Evvie says, everything and everyone is a bit wavy. Evvie is so open about the developments of their own queer and gender journey. And Evvie gives a lot of amazing advice for anyone who might be early on in their queer and in their gender journey. I learned so much from this conversation, and I think you will all get so much out of it. So without further ado, this is Dr. Evvie Jagoda. I hope you enjoy it. It looks like life has been good to you. Before we get started, can you tell me what you've been up to since we've been on Survivor?
Wow. Okay. So since we filmed Survivor, right after that, I finished my PhD. So had my PhD defense and everything like that. And then in September of that was 2021, I guess. I started working at the Broad Institute, which is a research institute here in Boston, or in Cambridge, actually. So I'm a full-time scientist there and love that. I moved from like kind of the burbs where you came to visit me, although we were not allowed to call it the burbs, but occasionally. I moved from there into Jamaica Plain, which is a cool neighborhood in Boston, filled with, among other things, a lot of queer people, and it's really fun. I know the neighbors on both sides of my house and across the street are all people I know, which is fun and special. And yeah, I don't know. Those are some things that have been happening with me.
Oh, it seems like you've been thriving. It seems like, yeah, since we first met, you have since become a doctor.
Yep.
You've moved into a bigger place. It looks like Evvie has grown and become a bigger and better version of themselves in Survivor. And it's been so amazing as a friend to be able to watch it all happen.
That's really nice. I like that. That's really, really nice.
Well, today I want to talk to you about all things coming out. This episode is going to come out the week of National Coming Out Day. So I want to backtrack to the beginning, to when I first laid my eyes on you. And one of the first things I noticed about you was your yay tattoo.
No, the first thing you thought was, are we going to wrestle?
Oh my God. I totally forgot about that. You're so right. Because when we go to LA, you're not allowed to talk to the other cast members. We're in our individual rooms. We get shuttled like back and forth by producers. So you don't get to see a lot of people.
Ugh.
But since Evvie and Erika are next to each other in the alphabet,
Yes.
when we were going back and forth between one thing, we ended up seeing each other. So I see Evvie come around the corner and I see that we're both petite in stature. And yes, you're right. My first thought was, oh my God, we're going to have to wrestle.
I remember that because you told me that after. I remember I was telling you, because yeah, you were one of the first, you were, I think, the first person I saw in LA who I knew was another Survivor cast member because of where, we were being shuttled around, like you said. And I told you, I was like, I saw you and I was like, oh, there's a cool person, like cool purple hair, love the vibe. And you're like, what I thought was, I'm going to have to wrestle that person.
I was ready to play, okay? The first thing I thought was, we're going to have to wrestle.
Yeah.
And then after I got exposed to you more, I was thinking, okay, we're going to be friends instantly. And then I also thought, oh, this person is actually a threat to win. Just through being around you and your presence, there was something that screamed that you were smart, but you also were down to earth. So you weren't going to let your ego get out of control, and that socially you would do well. I feel like I did pretty good with my predictions. So I thought for sure you were going to be a threat.
Well, that's very nice. And yeah, and then you were, of course, the biggest threat of them all. But, had that perfect thing where you didn't think that the first second you talked to you, and that's how you actually win. So I'll take the compliment, though. But, the instant perceive as a threat is actually not the winner tell it seems.
No. I mean, that could be good for the ego. But
sure,
yes. But who knows? Who knows what'll happen next time?
Yes.
So I'd say, okay, if we're going to rank my initial thoughts of you, then number 1, wrestling, number 2, friend, number 3, threat, then number 4, yay tattoo.
Okay.
So what is the origin story behind the tattoo?
I love that question. I had the full, I think a lot of queer people will probably relate to the experience of, I knew, but I didn't know, about in my own head even that I was queer. And the first fully no, I definitely know moment was I was at this summer research course and basically kissed a girl, and it was amazing and the best thing ever. And I kind of light bulbs went off in my head and I was like, woo, wow, that was the best thing that ever happened. But it was also very confusing because I was already in my 20s and felt like I kind of knew who I was a little more than that. But I was like, oh shit, this is destabilizing. Wow, I'll probably just date men again because that was a magical thing that happened one time, and how will I ever make that happen again? All right, so that was when I first realized in my head, okay, I'm definitely queer, but I don't know what to do about that. So I was kind of it basically took me another 6 months to really sort that out for myself, and then I really started dating non-men, and I was like, okay, this is great. But I felt it kind of that it just was a prolonged moment of coming out, of figuring that out. And so about a year after that happened, I was like, I don't want to just let that moment slide by. I want to have a party, a coming out party. So I threw myself a 1-year anniversary of coming out party in my apartment. And it was so fun. It was so gay. And I had a giant rainbow flag that I had on my wall as part of the decor. And my best friend, Maya, who's one of my best friends in the world, known her for a really long time, who is one of my roommates now, brought over these balloons that said the word yay. And it was just so perfect. It was just like, yay, that's what this is. Like, that is what this party is about. It's about how my queerness is this yay, ecstatic, euphoric thing in my life. And so I put the yay balloons, hung them on top of the rainbow flag, and I left that as like my main apartment decor for a couple of years. And I really wanted to get a queer tattoo, and I just knew like that yay rainbow, like that is the thing. And so it's both like, you know, symbolic of this thing I was feeling, this like gay euphoria moment. And also like recognition by my friends and this party I threw for myself, kind of like this whole thing of like self-love, love with others, queer euphoria, et cetera, et cetera.
It captures all of it perfectly. And I feel like it captures you perfectly in terms of just how much you celebrate your own queerness. You make it safe for everybody else around to, whether they're queer or even ask questions about queerness. It's always a celebration around you. So I think that that's perfect. How old were you when all of this happened?
So that was like I was like 23, 24 or something like that. And it's so funny. I'm glad you asked that, because I feel like I had so much shame at that time of like, I can't believe it took me so long to figure this out. Like, I'm so old. Like, so many people figured this out like in high school or college. And like now I'm 30, almost 31, and I'm just like, LOL. Like, I thought I was old, and like I was like too old to come out at 23. Like, you are never too old. I was just met someone who is in their, I think they're in their late 40s and coming out. And it's just like, whenever you make this self-realization, whenever you decide to, that's the time. And it's literally never too late. And there's also literally no shame about any element of that, like it at all.
It's so weird how when you're in your early 20s, you think that you're so old and you think that everybody else is so old, but that is not the case.
Yes.
And we're all just moving at our own journey. So like the time and the age, it doesn't matter.
Yes, exactly. And it's just like, you know, I also feel like part of the reason I felt shame around that is that I was like, I grew up in a basically liberal place with like basically accepting parents generally, you know, and like why I felt a lot of like, what is it about me that it took me so long? Like, I can understand someone coming out, quote unquote, later in, you know, if they were like in an more impressive environment or something like that, or a more like explicitly oppressive environment.
That is a point of view I would have never considered, that there would be this potential guilt in terms of the people around you and the environment around you is actually so accepting. What's wrong with me? Why can't I come out with this? And it just goes to show that there's reasons to feel guilty about just about anything. But then once you move through it, in hindsight, do you look back and you think, why did I feel so guilty about all of that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's just like, I think also it's like, we're all, I think that came from a place of thinking that there's like not knowing like of a freaking binary of like not knowing yourself, knowing yourself. You know what I mean? Or like not being free as like being a binary experience. And I was like, I should have moved from category A to category B sooner. But the older I get and the more experiences I have, the more I realize that life is always changing. Your understanding of yourself is always changing, and I like hopefully always changing and growing. And that's actually like part of the beauty of life. And it's normally the more stagnant you feel those things to be, or the more like boxed in you feel those things to be, the probably less you do know yourself. You know what I mean? And the less that you are like, I don't know, self-actualizing or something like this. You know what I mean? Like just in the sense of, yeah, it's always evolving. And I think that like I put queerness into this thing where it's like, that should be this like light bulb thing. And, you know, for me in some elements, it was like actually like having a sexual experience with a woman was a light bulb moment for me. But when I think about like my gender journey, like it's way like more like messy than that. And, you know, and I think it's just like, that is, you're just gonna in life have different things are going to hit you in different ways, you know? And no, looking back on it, I definitely don't have any shame. If anything, I think the shame has turned into like empathy for my younger self. You know what I mean? And like, no, Evvie, like you actually did have all this stuff that was scary and hard, and things that you were afraid of that are scary, and like messages that you receive from the world that are scary. And like, no matter what environment you're raised in, I think there's always this there's always going to be some amount in this world, heteronormative world that we live in. There's always going to be some messaging that queerness is scary or hard. And maybe, that's definitely changing, but it's still in there. So like, no matter what, it's a thing. It's a freaking thing. And so, no, I just have more like care for my younger self.
That's the thing. There's always going to be some element to it that's going to feel like a risk, and it's going to feel scary. And everyone just has to process that in the way that is best for them. And you taught me so much in terms of understanding that queerness is a journey, and how somebody might identify or how they might interact with their queerness right now could be different years from now, a week from now, tomorrow, and that's okay, and it's always evolving. And there was a moment from our season of Survivor during the Ponderosa videos where you were talking about how you self-identify as queer because that's just what works best for you. So what was it like for you to come to the journey deciding that that was the best word for you? And do you still identify as queer now, or is there another word that suits you better right now?
Love that question. And shout out, of course, to Tiffany from our season of Survivor, who I filmed that segment with.
Shout out Tiff.
Yeah, I mean, so, okay, what was it like? So it's very interesting because I think when I was first coming out and like in this self-exploratory moment, I think I was having, labels are hard. Labels are inherently like categorization, and it's like trying to put, a human fixed word on a messy, like emotional, sexual, queer, like gender landscape. You know what I mean? So labels, I think, are just hard. And I think like for me, the word queer, especially when I was like finding my queerness, became very clear that was going to be the word that was the best explanation, because at the time, like I think a lot of us, the term queer is a nice term because it is more of an umbrella term where, it can be used to encompass like all sorts of sexualities that are not straight, And so that definitely felt when I originally came to that word because I was like, I don't know if I'm like explicitly like a lesbian or mostly a lesbian or like whatever, but queer, I'm definitely queer. That word feels right. Queer community feels right. That all feels right. I actually, since the show, have done a lot more thinking about like that word, especially because of also that video, whenever you're putting something out there of like, here's me explaining something, that can be scary. And, it's not like I had Google to like help me come up with like good definitions when I was like filming that and things. And, the more I've learned and thought about the word queer, there's like, the other thing about the word queer is it's inherently like a radical term. It has radical roots. So I often think of like sometimes the dichotomy between like there's like gay stuff and there's queer stuff. And I often think of the word queer as like the more like radical versions of things. Like queering a space is kind of like, taking it out of like that heteronormative world. And obviously things like that it's just a more powerful word with like radical roots. So that like feels like really good to me in a lot of ways. And it just is an inherently non-boxy word, which I really like. But then the other thing is like, you really got me. I'm having some self thoughts here. It's like, I used to be afraid of to like that. I liked the word lesbian. I've always been like interested in the word lesbian, but I was like, oh, I don't know if I should use that word for myself because I have like dated men and I've loved men. That's what I used to think. That's why I used to be like, queer is definitely like, queer is for sure, right? Lesbian's like, and now I'm like, I feel even more like a lesbian, but I'm also not a woman. So I'm like, I don't know. Lesbian feels like a cool word to have around. You know what I mean? But, like non-binary, lesbian, queer, they, them, non-binary, trans, mask. I don't know. These are all just words. You know what I mean? But like, there's also me, and queer is definitely a safe word for me. The other thing is, speaking of Survivor stuff and explaining stuff to people, the first thing Jeff Probst ever said to me was, "Can I use the word queer in my casting interview?" And because he had not experienced that word since, I think the last time he like was confronted with that word in the Survivor context was probably like Rudy saying it as a derogatory term about Richard Hatch in season 1. And obviously Jeff has had other life experiences, but in the canonical Survivor world, you know, that's the last time that word had been on the show before I started using it for myself. So it's kind of a cool thing I remember thinking after that happened, I was like, well, I just explained to Jeff Probst that queer people have reclaimed that term. And even if I don't get on Survivor, that was a cool thing that I did that. But it also brings up that as I was, you know, having Survivor press and everything, I encountered that especially older members of the LGBTQ community don't always want that word applied to them and don't feel comfortable with it because of like having it used against them derogatorily. And I completely understand that. So it's like, for me, it's the word that's right for me. It's not the right word for everyone else. And the main thing I wanted people to take home from my Ponderosa video, which I said was, you should always use the term that people use for themselves. At whatever term they've identified to you as that they've told you, that's the word you should use. Don't try to apply your own word to them. Use the word that they've said. So, yeah, those are my feelings about that.
Thank you for once again demonstrating to me that it's a journey and that it's always changing, and that's okay. And I love what you said about how words are just words. As long as you're using the word that works for whoever you're talking to, words are just word. And honestly, like, labels are so weird. It's so weird how you have to check off a box for no real reason, because we're people. We're not, you know, just little things that exist on paper within boxes.
Yes, exactly.
So you mentioned that your gender identity journey was something that was always shifting too, as you were coming out as queer. And then I want to ask about how you almost came out again, basically, where we filmed Survivor, and at that time you're going by she, her pronouns. And then after the cast is announced and before the show starts airing, you come out again and you say that you're now going by she, they. So what is it like to not only be going through this gender identity journey, but then doing it when you're about to be on primetime TV?
Yes. I mean, it was crazy. And I think like with so many of the Survivor experiences, I wonder if you're feeling the same way, where like there was like the set of answers I had about all this stuff in 2021. And now it's been 2 years and I am also on a journey about those things now. So, you know, like, I feel like I'm actually even now only processing how weird that was, that my gender, like, I felt like in the middle of filming Survivor, I'm giving all these confessionals about the Yasa women versus the Yasa men. And the more and more I said that, the more I was like, ugh, that doesn't quite feel right. Like, I actually, being put in this situation, in this space, it's very clear to me that I'm not a woman. And that was in the middle of filming Survivor. So I'm like, all right, gonna deal with that later. Get home, right? And yeah, and like very clear. And it's not like I hadn't thought about it before, but like that experience really pushed me over the edge, where I was like, okay, yeah, clearly I am not cis. I don't yet know exactly what the right word is. And then there's this impending deadline that I'm about to be on TV. And I had some really good advice from a queer person on TikTok who I DM'd and set up a little consult with. Their advice was kind of like, it's much easier to introduce yourself than to reintroduce yourself. And so the idea was, you know, I could just not say anything before the cast comes out and the show comes out, and then come out as non-binary after. But it will be a lot harder for people to like retain that and get used to that. And I think that's so true. Like when you meet someone and then their gender expression changes or their name changes or their pronouns changes, it's often much harder for your brain to adapt than if you've just met them always with their current gender, their current pronouns. So I thought that was really good advice. And that kind of pushed me to like probably sooner than I would have otherwise, pushed me to be like, okay, I'm going to put in my, in my bio for everything, they/she or she/they. But I was like, literally still, do I do she/they or they/she? Am I non-binary? Am I genderqueer? I don't know. Like I really didn't yet, because words are hard. I really hadn't yet sorted through that, but I was like, I need to do something so that this is out there before everyone starts meeting me, in the, everyone being like the public. And so I don't regret anything about that, but I am now, as I'm like thinking through my gender more and I'm like more in this process, I'm like, wow, I really wasn't like feeling, I was like doing, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't like allowing that to like really like sink in an emotional level of like, wow, my gender is not what I always thought it was. You know what I mean? Like what, wow, let's like feel that. Let's unpack that emotionally. Let's, I was kind of like, I'm about to be on TV, use they for me sometimes. You know what I mean? And by the way, everyone listening, now I only use they, them. Please try your hardest to do that. Yeah. So now that I am like 2 years out, I'm like, and I think, again, journeys. I'm sure I would have had some amount of like feelings now regardless, but I think I'm a lot more unpacking like, okay, I actually am not, for example, I think like some non-binary people are non-binary in a sense of like, there's the fallacy that there's like a spectrum from like woman to man, and like non-binary people are like somewhere in between. Like I think it's actually more like, imagine non-binary people are like off the plane and like some other, you know what I mean? It's like gender's not binary. Non-binary people express their gender in like all sorts of ways, and it means all sorts of different things to them. And the only thing that unifies them is that they're not in the binary, right? I actually think for me, I'm probably something more like trans mask, where I'm like, which is also non-binary. Like, again, these are just fucking words to describe stuff. But I'm kind of like, for me personally, I'm like, I think I'm actually like, I'm just like in the masculine part of the field. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I personally land. But it's not like, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. You know what I mean? But I'm playing around with trans mask non-binary instead of just, before I was saying like gender queer. None of these, it's just freaking words.
As you're saying that, it's all just words. So I'm curious, maybe this is a bit of an existential question, but where do you think the desire to identify the right word comes from? Like, do you think that it's like you want to make sense of yourself?
Erika. Yeah, I think
I know. We're going philosophy here I
love it. Yeah, I think it is on some level like a desire to understand myself, or like a desire to like, I think it's also, I mean, very much like, this is, oh my God, we're really getting into like my therapy calls right now. Like,
let's do it.
Like, I think there's like this.
Okay. I mean, it's up to
you.
I
like
how much
it.
you want to go into the
it's
therapy.
Good. It's good. No. I mean, I think there's like, yeah, it's like an effort to like sort of understand, I guess, myself. I think what I'm realizing is that actually something about changing the word about it is allowing me to like access or envision my masculinity more, maybe, or something, you know what I mean? Where I'm like, I like, even though words are bullshit, they also are how we understand ourselves, right? And so I feel like there were times when like in like trying to like hold non-binariness, I felt attached to like that couldn't mean something, even though, again, as I said, that's literally not what non-binary is. Non-binary thing could be anything you fucking want. But I do think, I don't know. I think there's like some amount where like, I'm like, actually, when I think about myself and like what's happening for me, it's actually like maybe not that, but I don't quite yet know what is happening. Yeah, words, man.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. I wonder if there's an element to it where it's in this society where everything is created, so it's easy to put label on things. It's easy to, when you're filling out your demographic questionnaire, to check off the box. And now thankfully there's been progress where non-binary is an option. But the thing is, when you don't fit into one of the checked boxes, or if on that day you don't feel like checking the box that you checked yesterday, that's probably so confusing.
It's weird. It's weird. And it's like, I think to some level, the like accelerated timeline I had where I was like, I need to figure out what box I'm going to check in my Twitter bio so that when Mike Bloom does the preseason interviews, he uses the right pronouns. Like, that's probably not the ideal way to process that, you know? And like, it is putting things through these like, checked external forms for others. I think, trying to like externalize the internal and put it through the lens that you want the externals to see is complicated. And then you add a layer of being in the world, or God forbid, being on TV. And it's a whole other level of people perceiving you, you know?
Oh, yeah. It's so weird how an experience like that expedites something like this, where it's like, okay, I have to figure out how to self-describe because we're going to be on TV on X date. So I had read that you had said that Survivor actually helped you to figure out that at the time you were non-binary, or you were exploring the identity of being non-binary. You mentioned before that the confessionals and self-describing as a woman, that might have contributed to it. But was there any other part of that experience that helped you along in your gender identity journey?
Yes, I love it. I love it. Which honestly, this is our relationship. So this seems right. Like, I feel like in the post show, like this has been our relationship, is calling each other for informal therapy. So love that. Yeah, I think it was like, it's all this stuff that I'm saying of like, you as a person that's both auditioning and then being on the show, you're like trying to represent yourself. You know what I mean? And it really forces you to be like, what is me? What am I trying to put on paper? What am I trying to get these producers to understand about me and put on this TV show? And so when I was like choosing elements for my wardrobe, right? I'm like, okay, button down shirt, obviously. Bow tie, obviously. Like, bow tie feels like very related to my gender in that moment. It's actually like not that related to my gender now, but I think it was like kind of a first piece of like, like quote unquote menswear, like more like non-binary, like gender expression, or like transmasc gender expression, whatever the freaking word is. That was like an item that felt like, okay, that is core to like what I'm trying to put out there. You have to understand bow ties are a thing that I would wear if you're going to like understand me, you know? And then there's like, so, okay, you're doing all this stuff to try to understand yourself. And so I'm like picking my wardrobe. I'm like talking about myself in these confessionals. And then I'm also like in this way more binarized and straight environment than I've been for the last couple of years. You know, like have a lot of queer friends. I'm like deep in queer community in my regular life. I don't like, most people I know are like somewhere in the like, you know what I mean? There's definitely straight people. There's definitely cis people, but it's like all a little wavier. You know what I mean? Like everyone's a little wavy because that's like the water we're swimming in. But, you know, you get to Survivor, and not that to say that the cast members aren't often individually wavy, but the environment is very like, there's 3 men and there's 3 women, and there's Jeff in his shorts and his hat, and he's like woman in the black. You know what I mean? It's like very like the environment like has a formula. And part of the formula is like men will stick together and vote out the weak women. And like, you know what I mean? Like there's all these like formulas and scripts. And within that, I was like, I guess I'm supposed to be a woman on the tribe. You know what I mean? And like, and I'm putting all of that together, and like, I'm like, that's not feeling right. And I think there's kind of the element of like plucking me out of my environment where I was like, sure, yeah, I'm like a womanish, like in this world here. That I was like, oh wait, in this world, in being perceived through this lens, I am definitely not that, you know, if that makes some sense. But also I was like, definitely I'm on team woman, like versus the men.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I don't know exactly where I identify, and that's okay, but I know I'm on their team. Whatever it is, I'm with them.
Exactly. And I mean, I really feel like, you know, your story spoke to me so much of like, how are you being perceived by others? That is the freaking game of survivors. Like, how are you being perceived by others? How are you understanding that and utilizing that to your advantage? And like, that's why I freaking voted for you to win, because your story of that was so compelling of like, you understood how you were perceived, you had a plan around that, and you executed on it, you know? And I think like, that's the whole thing. And it also like is trippy as fuck, because you're like, how does everyone perceive me? Which like, I can't believe more people don't have gender crises coming off the show, you know?
Well, I mean, thank you for the vote. And I think a lot of people underestimate that people believe that the survivor experience is just you go there, you film the show, you come out of it. After I finished filming, I realized no, the survivor experience is actually also watching the show. And then now that it's been 2 years since our season has premiered, I realized no, actually it continues on. It doesn't just stop once there's a new season and there's a new cast and everything. So now that you've experienced, you know, this extended survivor experience, has this also influenced the way that you're now thinking about your sexuality and your gender journey?
Wow, what a question. I think, you know, I think, yeah, I'm really reflecting, honestly, in this interview about how much
Mhm.
like the massively being perceived by other people was so part of like a catalyst for all of this gender things that I've been feeling and working through. But I also feel like a major thing of like, I really do feel like the takeaway that I'm feeling now, and as you've
Mhm.
said, like this journey continues, like hit me up in 2 years and I'm sure I'll have a different takeaway. But like the thing I really am feeling is how much all of these things are journeys. Sexuality is a
Mhm.
journey, gender is a journey, things change, things move. It's not the same every single day. It's not like it might be or it might not be. You know, it might be the same throughout your whole life. It might shift, it might. And I think that also really came up when like I feel like I, you know, talk about like these things where I like have this shame. I felt, oh, that's such a bummer that I realized I was non-binary right in the show and didn't get to like be wearing that representation proudly on the show. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Didn't like, and it is actually hurts me that like when I watch
Mhm.
the show back, everyone's using she, her for me. Not like, not hurts me in the sense of people are doing anything wrong to me. It hurts me in my soul that like, that is the finished product, you
Mhm.
know, is that. But also every time I've expressed like, oh, I feel sad that I didn't get to like represent non-binary people or non-cis people on the show, and like I'm always met with queer people and non-binary people saying like, no, the experience of you were using she her and now you're using they them, that is part of the non-binary
Mhm.
experience, that is part of the journey, like that actually is a representative
Mhm.
experience, you know. And so like I just think that's freaking true. And I think like, you know, you always, I think there's a thing. I mean, we talked about like age a lot on our season, and I think that's like a thing that a lasting quote of mine from it was this thing where I said elder years or whatever. But like the thing the sorry Tiff, sorry Heather, uh, but you know, or later days, whatever it was, you got me
Mhm.
anyway. Like I do think there's this thing where we had this feeling of like if you're younger, it's harder to play survivor because you don't know yourself as well.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
that's so true. And I think as always, like at that time I was like, oh, I know myself pretty well. And now I'm like, I know myself better than I knew myself then. And that just is it. That is the journey. That is life. And like, yeah, it's cool. And I think, and I also think the other thing, I mean, is, so that's one piece of the takeaway. Long rambly answer.
No, it's all amazing.
Thank you. I think the other thing just so much for me is like being out in that way, being out on TV was like fucking so cool. Like the thing that people felt seen by seeing me, that people like, I got so many DMs of people like, I was able to talk to my parents about like my queerness because of you, or like my kid is queer and it was so awesome to see you out there. Like so many things like that I just feel so much like also expressing your sexuality and expressing your gender is like something everybody gets to do in the world if they want to, if they choose to. And it is powerful. Like, not like, oh, that's moving. Like, it's actually radical, revolutionary, power building, like meaningful in the sense of other people get to like see themselves in you. And that's like, whether you're walking down the street wearing whatever the fuck you want to be wearing, or whether that's being on TV wearing a bow tie. You know what I mean? Like, and I really, really, really do think, there's the personal and there's the public. And when you bring more of your personal self into the public, it uplifts people and is important. And I just like do encourage people, if it's safe, if it feels good, if it feels right, the outer you are, the more people get to be impacted by that. If it's safe, if it feels good, etc. And there's no shame if it's not, but if it does.
I'm so glad that you landed there, because it's really weird to have a specific version of yourself almost immortalized at one specific moment in time, and knowing that that's going to be the version of you people consume, but you have evolved beyond that. And I think that I'm happy that you're there now, because you have no reason to feel any guilt, because it would have been nice to have this more evolved version of you that's grown and has done more self-reflection on TV now. But the version of you who was that person at that moment was so impactful, and so many people saw themselves in Evvie at that specific moment. So you should be proud of yourself for being as proud as you could be at that time.
That's really nice. That's really nice. And it's true for all of us, I'm really sure, that like whatever we were bringing to that moment. And I think season 41 of Survivor does not get enough love. And I think we had really a special, special cast, and everyone was bringing something special to the table. And it's really nice of you to say. And I think like, I'm sure it's true for all of us that we've grown past those people in some ways, and the collection of individual versions of us that showed up there was magic and was special and important. And I'm really proud of myself and of you and of all of us,
I think that the season will get better with age, if I dare say. In its later years, it's going to be much more appreciated.
Yes, exactly. Season 41, like a fine wine,
So before we wrap up, I want to ask, for anybody who is earlier on in their journey, whether it's with their queerness or their gender identity or both, or whatever it is in terms of figuring themselves out, what would be your advice to them?
Wow. I feel like, okay, I've got a lot of different things, but I think one thing is that I really felt so strongly when I was first like coming out about my sexuality was like, don't be afraid in your own mind to have a scary thought. I think like something I really noticed that my brain would do when I was like, before I let myself understand that I was queer, is I would like have a thought of like, oh no, I'm probably gay. And then be like, no, you're not. And I like would not like even have the thought all the way. I would just like immediately shove it down in a way that I could actually like tangibly track that was happening. And I just really just like encourage anyone out there. And that applies to like sexuality, but also like anything. Like maybe you're like afraid to like lose your job or think you're like in a toxic relationship or like, so I mean, change your job or like in a toxic relationship or something like that. Like just let yourself explore what would happen if I changed this thing or if I allowed myself this thing or if I am gay or if I am queer, or if I am trans or if I am non-binary. Just sit with that as long as you can. And it's scary and our brains are trying to do things to like stop us from pain, but it's actually really important to like have those scary thoughts. And the answer could be, I'm queer and I don't want to ever tell anyone. And that's okay. Like that's a fine thought to have. Just let yourself like actually explore the thought as much as you can. Is thought number one. And thought number two is like, you are valid wherever you are in this. Like I said, if you have the thought, I think I might be queer and I never want to explore that again and I never want to tell anyone, like that's your choice. You're allowed to do that and you're valid and you're deserving of love and you're probably like, and you should consider yourself a member of the queer community if you want to, you know, like I think there's a lot of like, people have a lot of like, oh, am I gay and queer enough to be part of this community or am I trans enough or whatever it is. And I'm just like, if you are seeing yourself in this, you're in this. And don't shame yourself for however long it takes you or took you. Something that I've been wrestling with is like, I've always been like, oh, I always just like don't care about shopping. And I just would like buy one t-shirt and buy it in 5 pairs because I'm like too lazy or like don't want to spend money or like whatever. And it's like, no, it's because I was always like, what the fuck is my gender? And I don't know, this shirt feels like a good thing to wear and nothing else feels good. And I'm just going to like buy 5 of these shirts. You know what I mean? So that, again, some long-winded advice, but I think the most important part is love yourself. Like that, which is hard. It's so hard, but you're beautiful and valid and it's a journey and it's okay to be wherever you are. I think like National Coming Out Day can be so magical and powerful. And like I said, there's so much power in coming out and it can be probably so shaming and hard for people that are not there yet. And I just want to say, wherever you are, I see you, I love you, you're good. And if you are at the point where you can embrace it, freaking embrace it, because it is so happy and beautiful. And there are going to be so many people in your life that love you for that, for all of you. And those are the people that you should focus on, including yourself. Like, love yourself, love it all. And that's hard, but it's true. So those were some things. And
Evvie, I always get so much out of speaking to you, and you have taught me so much over the years. And even in this conversation, I've learned so much about how words don't matter, how you shouldn't feel guilty, how it's okay to be scared, and how you have to just love yourself. So thank you again for always just imparting your wisdom and being vulnerable and letting us learn through your journey. If people want to follow you, where can people keep up with you?
Okay, well, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Evvie Jagoda. I'm also on TikTok with that handle, but I was in a hole. My account was hacked, and I got it back. It's now I have it back, but it's frozen because the hackers still keep trying to hack it. So anyway, there's old videos out there, but you won't see anything new for me on that account for a long time. Yeah, and I just want to say, Erika, like, thank you so much for having me and having this conversation. Like, I think you're someone who I've always felt is like really like cares about me and cares about my experience and cares about queer people like a lot. And that really is amazing and extraordinary. And it's something that I love that you're doing with this platform that you have. And yeah, I just continue to, it was the easiest vote I ever cast, voting for you to win. And I just feel like I love what you're doing with it. Yeah, just excited to continue seeing more out of you as these journeys continue.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me because I've benefited so much from the queer community in terms of friendship, support. I know that I have a lot of queer people who were cheering me on during Survivor in terms of entertainment, and having conversations like this is the least I can do. And yeah, I never thought that operating like this would get your vote for $1 million. But hey, you could even just being like a good person maybe can pay off.
That's right.
No. It's a lot more than that.
That's
but
right.
Evvie, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I cannot wait for us to catch up again.
Yes, me too. And I'll just cancel my therapy session for next week because we got it.
Yeah, saved you a bit of money. Wow. Thank you, Evvie, for all of that insight. And I hope everyone listening, I don't know where you are on your journeys, or even if you are on your journeys, I, at the very least, hope that through listening to that, you have no reason to ever feel guilty. And I hope you don't feel ashamed. And I hope you know that you are loved and amazing just as you are. Thank you, Evvie, for always sharing all of your wisdom and being so vulnerable and open with sharing your own experiences. Now, every episode, I answer a listener question. And this week's question is, how do you stay so positive? And the answer is, I don't. I have so many moments of self-doubt. I worry that I'm not doing enough. I worry that I'm doing too much and I'm going to miss out on things. I worry that I'm a failure or that my instincts aren't right. I have so many moments where I doubt myself, and then I can spiral and start to think, oh no, have I just, wasted all the opportunity given to me because there's something deficient or there's something wrong with me. So yes, I have so many of those thoughts, probably more often than people realize. At the same time, I allow myself to accept that these are just thoughts and nothing more. And over the last few years, I've really been able to develop a better relationship with myself. And I've really been able to develop a strong belief in myself and a confidence in myself and what I bring to the table, and an acceptance of who I am, which is a very imperfect person. And when I have those moments of self-doubt, I really work hard to make sure that I return to the version of myself that I know, which is a version who loves and accepts herself and knows that she's capable no matter what. And in terms of how I appear positive, and I think that somebody asked me this question because I do appear quite positive. To be honest, I think part of that is intentional. One, naturally, I will admit I'm a very optimistic person, but among my friends, I always have this conversation where I think that the world is flopping, and we could easily have a conversation about all the ways that the world is flopping and is messed up right now. And I think to myself, what is it that I want to contribute? And it's important for me to contribute that I am trying to be positive about myself. I'm trying to love myself. I'm trying to be supportive of other people. I'm trying to demonstrate having faith in oneself, because there's so much that sucks out there. I don't want to contribute to that. And I stay away from things like confrontation and conflict, not because I'm afraid of it or anything, but it's more so because I think to myself, who does this serve? If I'm going to say something shitty about another person, or spill the tea about something, or call somebody out for something that is quite minor, who am I helping and who am I serving in that situation? And of course, I know this doesn't apply to every single situation. There are certainly situations where your voice and standing up for yourself and sharing your point of view does matter, because it is going to be impactful and it can make a difference for so many people. So I recognize that for bigger things, you have to step up and say something. So overall, I remain positive, and I'm contributing positivity to the world because I am choosing to. It is an active choice. And that's where I'm at right now. But as Evvie said, in many ways and in many situations and many arenas of life, there's always going to be evolution. There's always going to be things changing. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow I'm going to wake up and decide, you know what, I want to start sharing more of the negative in my life or my negative views about things. But right now, where I'm at is I want to try as best as I can, as the imperfect person as I am, to contribute positivity. So thank you so much to the listener for submitting that question. I love seeing what everyone is curious about. And if anybody has any questions for me, let me know in the comments or send me a DM at the podcast Instagram account. It's at Happy to See Me Pod, and I just might answer it in a future episode. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you get your podcast because it really helps me out. And we are on YouTube at Happy to See Me Pod. And as I said, we're on Instagram at Happy to See Me Pod. Thank you for spending time with me this week, and I will be happy to see you next Monday.